When two things are connected, then they're essentially one unit, are they not? You may very well say that where you park your car is in the attached garage. But when speaking of your house or home, you think of the garage as part of it, since it serves a necessary function for you and your family. They share the same roof and foundation. Two, but one. Connected. In part one of this series, I pointed out the idea that the fifth commandment of the 10 Commandments is a bridge connecting the first 5 with the last 5. This commandment reads, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord God is giving you." Does this apply to man or God? Well, the answer is both. That's why it's a bridge and brings the flesh and spirit together, which is really our reality, is it not? Heaven is not up there somewhere except in the sense of a higher way of thinking and doing. Heaven is not locational, but dimensional. And so, John tells us that we cannot say we love God whom we don't see if we don't love our brother who we see. So, what am I saying? Honor your father and mother here, and honor your father and mother there. Why? Because one reflects the other. We came into this world because of our father and mother, and we came into this world because of our father and mother, flesh and spirit. And in both cases, there is a union, a joining, a conception, leading to our birth. All of us know how the fleshly side is conceived by the union of mother and father, but what about the spiritual side? As we considered in part 1, our father is God, and our mother is His covenant. And this conception, it shows up in us as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You see, my friend, this tree, if you will, is on the inside, not the outside, for our heart is the ground in which the seed of His living and active Word is planted. For this reason, we can view the tree of knowledge as symbolic of the old covenant and law of God from which comes our conscience. Once we understand these things, then we can further understand that the tree of knowledge can be seen as people. That is, our caretakers, family, friends, society, and culture into which we are born. For that is our source of knowledge, is it not? So, let's think about a tree for a moment. Why a tree? Why not something besides a garden, trees, and fruit to represent spiritual realities? The simple answer? Because a tree is a perfect example of union, where two are one. That is, the ground and the seed, and both dependent on each other. You might have 1,000 apple seeds in your barn, but if you never plant them, well, you'll never have fruit. There must be union. Two, but one. Connected. And so this brings me back to my favorite passage and the wisdom contained therein. For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. Let me remind you about the spiritual meaning of two. It means either division and or witness. For when two don't agree, well, there's division, but when two agree, there's witness. And why should we consider this? Because it tells us something about our Creator, and first and foremost, it's this: you can't have union if there isn't two. So, it's no wonder that when God declares it is not good that the man should be alone, He follows with, "I will make him a helper fit for him." Of course, what follows is the creation of woman, not another man, but a woman. Why? For the purpose of union. Male sows the seed and the woman receives it. So, male and female, divided, come together in union, a child is conceived, and a witness is born of that union. And by the way, the woman is not an afterthought. What did I just explain in this? Sowing and reaping, where a seed is planted and an eventual harvest is reaped, without which nothing would exist. For the same process works in the plant, insect, and animal kingdoms, as well as in the invisible realms of thought and emotion. And when we consider the fact that a child is born due to the action of union or sowing and reaping, then we also recognize that it's the process of creation itself. Now, here's the interesting thing. Before we reach the verses about the formation of the woman from the man, we first read that following the creation of man or mankind, the Lord God plants a garden. Literal? Of course not. Rather, the garden denotes the sowing and reaping principle just described. And so, what does our Creator do once He plants this garden? He puts man or mankind in it. This agrees with Galatians 6, verses 7 through 10. So, let me back up a minute to Romans 1:20. What is it saying? It speaks of God's invisible attributes. What are these? His eternal power and divine nature. Maybe it sounds a bit crazy, but I see a male and female or mother and father aspect in this twofold description, where his eternal power is male and his divine nature is female. Two, but one. I also see a balance, for power apart from nature is tyranny, is it not? After all, God's nature is love. That's what John says. Perhaps that's why so many believe in eternal conscious torment. They're out of balance, leaning too much to the male or aggressive side. I repeat, there must be a balance. If we bring this back to Adam and Eve, we must remember that in the beginning, Adam was just one, then became two. Why? To become one again. That's union. In the same way, God's invisible attributes are two, but one. To speak of His eternal power is to also speak of His divine nature, for they are two sides of the same coin. Now, let me bring up the most important thing about Romans 1:20. We're told that His eternal power and divine nature can be clearly perceived in the things that have been made. And this is true since the creation of the world. Wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it? But here's what's so precious and amazing about this. God has not left us without a witness of truth. What do I mean by this? I'm talking about His creation, which incorporates everything we see. Case in point, the principle of sowing and reaping. It surrounds us, does it not? And it's a biological wonder, a law of nature, and indisputable in its truth and essence. To argue with sowing and reaping is to argue with science and with the spiritual principles that all of it reflects. And to add the icing to the cake, sowing and reaping is what the Bible calls resurrection. That's what resurrection is, the process of sowing and reaping working within our inner being. The more we understand the first, the more we understand the second. What is equally amazing is this. Within the scope of sowing and reaping and or resurrection also lies the concept of union and or covenant. For just as sowing and reaping is resurrection, union is covenant. They are synonymous. In this realm, it's called marriage, which is basically a, quote, contract between a man and woman, including a promise of fidelity and faith. You see, my friend, marriage, which is union and covenant, reflects the same in the spiritual realm. That's why Paul likens the Lord's relationship with the church as husband and wife. Okay, So, what we have here is a pattern where we are presented with two things to consider, but they are in essence one. Separate in one sense, but always connected. And as I've said a lot, two sides of the same coin. And because this pattern exists in the things He's created, we can have confidence in our understanding of truth. The created things become the witness to the spiritual realities, letting us know we're on the right track. And that, dear brother and sister, is the most precious thing of all. When we see the truth of God through the lens of creation, there is no confusion. This helps us to understand why Jesus taught in parables, using natural things to explain the spiritual. In fact, one of the most important parables, at least in my estimation, is that of the parable of the sower. My take, the parable of the sower is another view of the Garden of Eden. I know, much to think about, so I'll close for now, but be sure to join me next time. And please, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of Grain of Wheat Publishing.